Here are two true night drive horror stories. A bit of context. My father left my mother not long after I was born. He was a selfish and incredulous man, driven by his own will and desires. Whether I'm his only child, we don't know, but we're skeptical that I'm not. I would visit him as a child and stay over at his house, the usual divorced parents with a child scenario. As I got older, the visits got fewer and fewer, and we clashed a lot, both being defiant about the other. Eventually, the visits stopped. I couldn't take the arguing, the heartache, or the rejection from my own father. It was too much. To no avail, we tried to rekindle our relationship multiple times. It only caused more heartache and pain, and gradually we drifted apart. He knows nothing about me now that I am in my 20s, and I'd like to keep it that way. But I know plenty about him. He's blocked on every social media site. Any form of contact has been severed by me, but every now and then I get curious. I want to see what he's up to, so I started making stops by his house. He lives on the other side of town, but I find ways of getting there secretly. My mother knows I do this, but she isn't aware of how often. I slivered to his house at night, shielded by the dark. I peeped through his backyard fence and into his kitchen, just watching him with his new family and watching him live his new life. I've seen his stepchildren grow. I've seen his grandchildren come and go for weekend visits. I used to be jealous, but not anymore. No, now I am intrigued. I like to tease my father about the daughter that he forgot and moved on from. I place little reminders of me in his backyard, next to his back door, a childhood toy, an item of clothing, something that makes his heart swell and his mind ache, a little reminder that I still exist, despite his lack of contact with me. I even posted one of my graduation photos through his door one Easter morning. Now that took some balls. But lately I've become addicted to visiting his house after dark. It's like I can't get enough of watching his life unfold through his kitchen window. I gaze and I stare through the little cracks in his fence, watching his and his family's every move. I often feel a sense of loss and grief, but not for long. But last night was different. I had paid him a visit around 10 p.m., twice to be exact. The first time went unnoticed as usual. I hid and I watched, his eyes transfixed by his phone. The second time, around 20 minutes later, I snuck up to the fence again, holding my breath and watching. This time he made his way to the back door, and I watched, curious to see if he'd notice me and terrified if he did. But I was frozen to my spot, to my ritualistic hiding place. I didn't know what to do. I watched through the fence, holding my breath. He made his way to the bin, disposing of something before slinking back inside. I let out a brief sigh of relief and continued to watch. He slunk about his kitchen, tidying up and putting the kettle on for a late-night drink. All the time I watched and I watched and I watched. It felt like I was there for hours. I watched as the light went out and figured he must have made his way upstairs. I then had a sudden idea, a longing feeling, to go inside and be with him. So I snuck into his backyard, quiet and stealthy. He didn't know I was there. Nobody did. I heard a baby's cry come from upstairs, and I watched eagerly from below as a light went on. I saw a silhouette make their way to what must have been the baby's crib. Then another light came on, the landing light, and soon the kitchen light followed. I dove beneath the kitchen window, anxiety swirling through my veins, my heart pummeling my chest. I could hear the clatter of dishes as someone prepared a bottle for the baby, whom I presumed to be the youngest grandchild. The noise then stopped, and I heard footsteps leading away from the kitchen, but the light stayed on. Curiosity overcame me, and I looked through the kitchen window, dying to catch a closer glimpse of his other life. The life he had left me and my mother for, the life he had disregarded me for. I took in the surroundings and saw the glitz and glam of what I guessed to be his new kitchen, and anger swirled inside of me. Me and my mother have never been very well off, so seeing his glamorous life, even if it only involved a kitchen, upset me. Our house was a shambles, falling apart, whereas his house was pristine and new. I stood gawking through the window for what seemed like a decade before I could hear footsteps coming down the stairs again. I waited until the last minute to duck beneath the window, managing to catch a small glimpse of my father, now aged and tired. He looked terrible, nothing at all like the man I had cut contact with. I waited and waited and waited, all the while holding my breath like my life depended on it. After what seemed like a century, the kitchen light flickered and then went out. Unusual given that it was a new kitchen. I took this as an opportunity to peep through the window once more, even though I hadn't heard retreating footsteps. I raised my head so that my eyes could see over the windowsill. I watched him through the darkness. I felt lost and sad. All I ever wanted was to be loved by him. Unknowingly, I stretched my hand up to the window, silently pressing my palm against the glass. I just wanted to be closer to him. I wanted a dad, my dad. I heard a gasp and a clatter as he must have seen me. Rushed footsteps echoed towards the back door, and by then I knew I had been caught, but what did it matter anymore? I was about to see my dad. He threw open his back door and stood on the doorstep, bewildered and afraid. I stood before him, but he couldn't see me. He couldn't see anything. His confusion and fear made me smile a little, a small revenge for all the heartache he had caused me as a child. A breeze passed through the yard. He shivered before turning away, locking the door and retreating upstairs, back to his new family. It's been a few years since I lost my life to a drunk driver, but I still like to visit my dad. I like to remind him that I'm still here, still watching. I'm still waiting for the love and life I never received from him. Tonight I think I'm going to go inside and pay him a visit. Tonight I think I'll properly make myself known so that he can never forget me. Tonight I'll make sure he remembers the child he left behind. On to the next story. If you are liking these night drive stories, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. It was late one evening, and I was sat at my kitchen table just typing away on my laptop, working on my latest screenplay. You see, I am a horror writer. I write stories of the dark and macabre with the express purpose of selling them to major studios with the hopes of getting them turned into major motion picture. At least, that's how it would ideally go. It's been especially tough recently because for the last 2 weeks I have had the most serious case of writer's block I have ever had. Like, all the pieces are there, but I just can't seem to put it all together. It's frustrating, really. Anyway, back to that evening. I was sitting at my table, staring blankly at my computer screen, at a total loss, when suddenly I got a spark of inspiration in the most peculiar way. As I was mulling over what to name the main antagonist of my story, off in the distance, I could have sworn I heard an ice cream truck. How weird. It was approaching midnight. What would an ice cream truck be doing out at this time of night? Not long after hearing those first distinct notes of ice cream truck music, it occurred to me that the sound was getting closer. I just had to see this for myself. So I got up from my chair, walked over to my front door, opened it, stepped out onto my front porch, and not 10 seconds later, I saw it. It was your standard ice cream truck, with pictures of all sorts of ice cream treats posted on the side, and it whizzed right by, a lot faster than I had ever seen an ice cream truck go. Heck, I thought those things topped out around 6 miles an hour, and blaring its music much louder than I had ever heard an ice cream truck play its music. I thought the whole thing was unusual and rather creepy. Normally the song Turkey in the Straw is a pleasant, jaunty tune, but something about hearing it when it's dark out just made it super eerie. A couple things bothered me about that ice cream truck. Firstly, his music was loud enough to wake the dead. Now, I wouldn't be overly surprised if I was the only person who heard it, given that as a writer I tend to keep odd and usually pretty late hours. But come on, man, be considerate. People are trying to sleep. Also, how fast he was going. Why was he driving so fast? Where did he have to get with that degree of urgency at this hour? Whatever, I thought, and went back inside. I sat back down at the table and just sat there in silence for a few minutes with my head in my hands before it hit me. That's what I would write about. I hit the keys ferociously that night. I had finally found my story. I would write about an ice cream truck that would only go out at night, the driver of which would be a deranged old man who used his truck to run down townspeople who he deemed to be in violation of some sort of curfew or something. Kinda like a boogeyman, who preyed on his community to rid it of the people he viewed as being insubordinate. It was perfect. What a bit of serendipity I had stumbled upon. The more I thought about that ice cream truck, the more innocuous I figured it was. The driver was probably just in a rush to get home and left the music on, and just didn't notice. I imagine after spending hours on end in one of those trucks, you probably just learned to tune the music out in an effort to maintain one's sanity. Anyway, I ended up writing straight up until 3:30 a.m. when my body gave out and I just couldn't stay up any longer. Over the next so many weeks, my script really began to take shape. I was on to something good, I thought. I had a compelling antagonist, some decent plot points, and some thorough character development. I had no idea what I would do for an ending, but whatever, I figured I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. It would be about a month before I saw the ice cream truck again. Just as before, I was at my computer working away at my script, when out of the blue, I heard it. This time, it was around 9:30 p.m. He shaved some time off his previous record, I joked to myself, so I went outside to see this strange ice cream man. I recognized it as the same truck as last time as it zoomed on by, just as before, this time playing the song The Entertainer on full blast. Generally a nice song, but pretty creepy after sundown. Now, I couldn't deny how weird the whole situation was. Like, I get that with it being summer and all, kids are out of school and likely don't have as strictly enforced of a bedtime, but still, who was this guy looking to sell ice cream to at this hour? I shrugged it off and went back inside, not thinking any more about it. As I sat back down to work on my screenplay, I had one final thought. What if this script does get picked up and goes on to be made into a movie? Would this guy realize that he was the main influence of the story? I don't know, but then I figured that any ice cream man who had to work that late into the night likely didn't have much time to go to the movies anyway. In the following days, I got an immense amount of work done on the script. I was feeling pretty darn proud of myself for getting so much work done, as well as feeling thankful that something like this just fell into my lap. However, it wasn't just this late-night mystery ice cream vendor that influenced my story. I also garnered influence from other sources. For instance, on the local news one morning I saw that the body of a local streetwalker had been found in a ditch. Poor girl, I thought, but it gave me an idea for my story for the sadistic ice cream man who stalked the night to collect the bodies of those he ran down and take them to his own secluded personal dumping ground in the woods. Macabre, I know, but things were coming along so nicely, and I was on a roll. It would be nearly 3 weeks before I saw the ice cream truck for a third time, but this time was markedly different than the previous 2 encounters. As I went outside for my customary 1 a.m. cigarette, I saw it in the dim lighting of the street lights that illuminated my sleepy suburban street. This time there was no music, and the driver was driving at a reasonably average pace, if not slower than an ice cream truck would normally go. So I figured I would do a little independent experiment, if you will, and I went to the side of the road to see if he would stop for me. I approached the curb, fished a couple of crumpled $1 bills out of my pocket, and waited for him to drive by. He drove by at a snail's pace, not stopping or even seeming to notice me. This encounter was notable, however, as this would mark the first time I got a look at this mystery ice cream truck driver's face. He was younger than I thought he would be, and much younger than the character in my story that he inspired. He looked to be in his late 20s, with thinning, dirty blonde hair and a soul patch. He was wide-eyed and appeared to be pretty out of it. The strangest thing about him, though, was that as he drove by, it looked as though he was fervently looking for something. He looked somewhat nervous and sweaty as he moved his head side to side, intently surveying the area. I thought he could have possibly been on drugs, or maybe it had just been the really long day he had had. No telling, really. I watched him drive away, still just muddling along into the night. After he disappeared from my line of vision, I dropped my cigarette in my driveway, stomped it out, and headed back inside to close out for the night. About a month went by, and my script was in great shape. I had submitted it to several studios, getting mostly positive feedback and several requests for a rewrite. Still, no formal offers to get it picked up and produced as of yet, but things were certainly trending in the right direction. I was on the phone one night with a studio head from California. We were talking about my script, a couple of things that he wanted shored up and the like. He told me that the studio liked my story and that they thought my idea of a psychotic ice cream man terrorizing his community under the cover of night and raining judgment down upon the innocent was an inventive wrinkle and would make for a solid slasher flick. After that, he told me that they wanted a rewrite, but with a couple of additions, specifically a little more in way of an origin story of the old man. No problem, I said enthusiastically. What the studio head said next nearly made me fall out of my chair. He said that if I could do all that, then they were prepared to make me a hefty, high, 5-figure offer for the script. I was awestruck. I thanked him profusely and told him I would get on it first thing tomorrow morning. We said our goodbyes and hung up. I could not believe how this had all transpired. Right after the call with the studio head, I called my mother to tell her the good news. I told her about how I had just gotten off the phone with the head of a major film studio and how the script had been coming along great, that all they wanted were a couple of small changes, and that if I could do that to their liking, they would likely offer me a substantial amount of money for it. I then went on to tell her about my main inspiration for the story, to which she echoed my sentiments about it being weird, but likely nothing. I told her I loved her, she told me she loved me too, and we hung up for the night. I sat there on my couch for about 10 minutes when I heard music off in the distance, and not just any music, but ice cream truck music. A small smile grew across my face. I didn't go outside this time, instead opting to just stay inside and look out my front bay window. Yep, there he was, driving way too fast and blasting Camptown races way too loud. I didn't care, however. This odd recurring phenomenon may end up making me a small fortune, so I just stood there in the window, and as he drove by, gave him a small salute, as if to say, "Thank you for your unending inspiration. These past couple of months, I couldn't have done it without you." And on that note, I closed up shop for the night, got ready for bed, and laid down to go to sleep. Sleep came easily for me that night, and I went to bed feeling great. I got up early the next morning, feeling energized. I went into my living room and turned on the TV to watch the morning news, and the breaking story of the morning made my blood go sub-zero. There, on my TV screen, was the ice cream man I had seen in my neighborhood at all those odd hours. I recognized the pasty white complexion, messy dirty blonde hair, and soul patch. I learned that his name was Eric Douglas Glenman. He had been taken into police custody last night on suspicion of the abduction, torture, and murder of several local children. I just about threw up when I saw this. When in police custody and asked for his confession, he sang like a bird, and the resulting statement answered all of my questions. He said that he would go out in the evenings in his ice cream truck, looking for kids who were all alone, to abduct. When he came upon one, he would drive up to them and offer them free ice cream under the guise of it being late in the day and not wanting the ice cream to go bad. From there he would grab them and pull them into the back of his truck. That's when he would turn his music on as loud as it could go, so that no one could hear the kids screaming in the back of his truck. He would also drive away as fast as he could to make a quick getaway. He was asked to disclose his methods of torture and murder, to which he declined. That was probably for the best. I honestly don't think I would have wanted to know anyway. When asked if he ever saw anyone who may have witnessed his crimes, he said for the most part no, except for this one time when he was out skulking through a neighborhood, and he saw this one guy standing by the side of the road, smoking a cigarette, and holding a couple of dollar bills in his hand. I turned off the TV after that, as I was in a state of shock. I went over to my laptop, opened up my script, and promptly deleted it. I guess it's true what they say. Fact is stranger than fiction, because this was by far and away scarier than anything I could have ever written. If you are still listening, thank you for your support. Please consider subscribing for more content like this.